Hello, I'm Joe Lenton from Original Art Photography. In this video we're going to have a look at removing distractions in the background of pictures in Photoshop. In this particular picture here, the distraction that we're actually talking about is this area here. We've got a little bit of the chair sticking out, and that I want to just get rid of. If I just zoom in a little bit more so that you can see it a bit more clearly. There it is, there's the back of the chair that he's sitting on, and that is just poking through in the background. And I want to just show you a way that you can use to get rid of that, so you wouldn't have something like that interfering in your image. Now, of course, you can try things like the healing brush, and where it doesn't touch anything else in the middle here, for example, you might be able to get some results if you go with that with the healing brush tool. With that regard there, it's fine. Once we start getting in nearer the edge there, that can become a little bit more difficult. It's alright if the line goes in a continuous line all the way down there like that, because we could copy from here and then keep going in that line and just work our way down and paint that in and get rid of it that way. However, we can see that the jacket curls outwards like this, and then again there's another movement there, so that's becoming a little bit more difficult to make that work. We could work with the clone stamp tool. Let's just put that 100% for the moment. So you could just be very careful as you get near the edge and try not to get that wrong. As you can see, you know, working with the clone stamp tool, it does enable you to get a little bit nearer the edge without that sort of blur that you get from the healing tool, but it's going to be much more difficult because you're going to have to also sort out this area back here, and you're still going to have to be very careful as you go along the edges. So if you had anything that was a little bit more complex than this, it would then start to get really quite difficult. So what I'm going to show you is another method that I use to restrict the area that I'm working in, and this I find makes it a little bit easier to work with the clone stamp and the healing brushes without it being quite so fiddly, quite such a mess. So I use the pen tool, which you can select using P or over there on the left hand side for the icon. I'm not going to talk in detail about how to use the pen tool. I have covered that in our Photoshop for Photographers course, but basically we're just going to click and drag ourselves a path that goes along the edge here, following this. You can zoom in a little bit more if you find that a little bit easier to work with that way, following the edge of the jacket like so. So we create a, that it's going to be too long, just that in there, there we go. We create a very precise selection along the edge here, and what we're going to do is then use that selection to protect areas of the image that we really don't want to be affected. Okay, so now I've gone around the edge of there, I can just come over here and join these up. Now what we need to do is right click and make selection. We'll try it with a feather radius of 1, see how that goes, but you don't want much of a feather radius, otherwise it kind of defeats the object of having that very precise selection. So now what we're going to do is work using the clone stamp tool and the healing brush tool within this sort of area here, and it's going to be restricted just to the area within the marching ants, the flashing dotted line here. So the healing brush tool doesn't quite make it, because we still get that blurring when we get in near the edges there. You see, it still picks that up despite the fact that it's outside of our selection. But if we go for our clone stamp tool and we go for something, let's start around about 50%. I don't have to be too careful over by the edge here, you see. I can go over it because nothing happens if I go over the edge there. So I can be quite quick with how I'm painting that on. It really doesn't matter because the edge is being safeguarded there by that selection that we've made. So now we can see that we just want to neaten this off a bit. So now we can go back to the healing brush, and we can use that to blend it in. If you can see here, you can see the edge of our area that we've done with the clone stamp there. That just looks a little bit too obvious at the moment. So if we just start to blend those in, you just got to make sure you don't go over the edge there like that of the selection, otherwise you start to pull in some of that bit of his jacket. But we can go sort of right in here like that and blend that all in a bit better. Now if I remove that selection, I can zoom out, and there we go, you see that's gone. And it's nice and neat. Doesn't take very long to do. You might say, well, it's just as quick to be very zoom in a long way and be very careful with your clone stamp. Yeah, you might find that. I'm personally, in these situations, I like making that selection there and just making it a bit easier that way for me to work with. And you can see that we can get a nice, neat looking edge to it all. There's nothing there where it looks like it's all blending in, blurred over the edges. If anything needs a little bit of tidying up, you can now just go in and use the healing brush or the clone stamp to finish it off. But you see, just by making that selection, we've restricted the area within which we can do our cloning and our healing. And certainly for the cloning, it really does make a big difference, because you can go right up to that edge and over it and just paint around it very quickly without too much care, and it doesn't matter because we're with that edge is being limited by that selection that we made with the pen tool. So that is one way that you can use for getting rid of things you don't want in the background. You're using a selection made with the pen tool to limit the area that is being affected by your retouching. I hope you found that helpful. My name is Joe Lenton from Original Art Photography.